now go on to the superintendent's proposed FY 2022 capital budget and FY 2023 through 2027 capital improvement program. Dr. Moderano, you have a report for us.
I do. I was going to deliver my first one from the evening, but I'll give you a different one now. Good evening, board members. Once again.
Happy birthday again.
Yes, I will. Happy birthday to you.
Okay, because it is. I just want to point out, it's still my birthday.
It is.
So
it is.
Keep this meeting moving.
Board members, as you know, our capital budget provides for improvements in capacity where they are most urgently needed to relieve crowded schools, ensure the equitable allocation of instructional resources, and give all students and staff equitable opportunities to learn and achieve. Tonight's presentation is the first step in the annual capital budget process, which will conclude with the board's approval of the final capital budget in May of 2021. Before staff begin the presentation, I'd like to emphasize several critical points for the board's consideration. The board's 3 priority capital projects are proceeding on schedule according to the FY21 budget. These include Talbot Springs Elementary, scheduled for occupancy for fall of 2022, which has received local and state funding. This new building will replace an aging school with a new modern energy-efficient facility at approximately 160 seats and provide facilities to accommodate many essential resources and services to support students and families in one of Howard County's most disadvantaged communities. Next, new high school number 13, scheduled to open in the fall of 2023, which has also received local and state funding. This long-awaited project will help relieve the considerable crowding experienced in our eastern high schools. Hammond High School renovation and addition, also scheduled to open in the fall of 2023, which will provide additional seats in a growing part of the county and address building concerns that have been repeatedly delayed. The project remained a B status with the state and has received only local funding. Currently, the FY 2022 capital budget is approximately $108 million for the 3 priority projects, systemic projects, and continued ongoing projects. Our top 3 priority projects alone represent a total of $76.8 million. The project's totals for high school number 13 and Hammond High School reflect a reduction of approximately $19 million savings realized through the project bids, which were significantly lower than originally budgeted. Even with these savings, the combined request is significant and we will need continuity of funding. While our FY22 request currently stands at $108 million, or $5.6 million over our current FY21 budget, the anticipated maximum funding for FY22 from both the county and state at this time is only $74.6 million. This is $33.4 million less than our current draft request and is $2.2 million short of the cost of the top 3 projects alone. This means that the other priorities could go unfunded, including many critical systemic and ongoing projects. Our FY22 capital planning must also consider future year costs. Specifically, we will continue to need funding during FY23 and FY24 to complete new high school number 13 and Hammond High School. For FY21, we received $68.7 million from the county, an increase of $20.2 million over FY20. For FY22, initial estimates from the county executive staff range from $50 million to $54 million. As we continue through the capital budget process, it is possible that the actual allocation will change, as it is too early for the county to provide the exact commitment. The net increase in county funding has increased 10% between FY14 to FY21. And we especially appreciate the significant increase the county provided during FY21 to support moving all 3 of the board's priority projects forward. Over the past 10 years, the Howard County Public School System has received an average of $17 million annually in capital funding from the state. Last year, FY21, we requested $44.4 million and received $33.7 million. While this was considerably less than we requested, it was the highest amount we have received over the past 16 years, and the higher amount was partially due to the additional enrollment growth and relocatable classroom funding allocation at 100% to support our higher than state average enrollment growth. We will need continued support from the state as we continue our 3 major construction projects. Over the next several months, we will engage in a dialogue with the county executive and state delegation leaders to collaboratively address the funding challenges to sustain our capital projects. Board members, at this time, I will now turn it over to Scott Washington, our Chief Operating Officer, and Dan Lubley, Acting Director of Capital Planning and Construction. Mr. Washington.
Good evening. Once again, Scott Washington, Chief Operating Officer. It is our pleasure to present the Superintendent's proposed FY 2022 capital budget, including both the FY 2023 through 2027 capital improvement program and FY 2022 through 2031 long-range master plan. As noted previously, the budget demonstrates Hcpss's commitment to provide quality facilities for our staff and students, as well as protect our facility investments. The CIP consists of new schools, major renovations, additions, systemic upgrades, temporary classrooms, and specialty projects, all along with both our feasibility study and comprehensive maintenance plan. As is mentioned, the 3 priority projects are represented in this study, 2 which are already in progress, our high school number 13 and our Hammond High School, and 1 which the board approved tonight to receive in Tower Springs Elementary School, which will begin construction in October. And at this time, I will turn over to Mr. Lubley, who will go through the budget in more detail.
Good evening once more. Thank you, Dr. Martirano and Mr. Washington. Again, I am Dan Lubley, the Acting Director of Capital Planning and Construction. It is my pleasure to present the Superintendent's proposed fiscal year or FY 2022 capital budget, the capital improvement program for fiscal year 2023 through 2027, and the long-range master plan for FY 2022 through FY 2031. This evening, I will present the superintendent's scenario, which reflects the continuity of the superintendent's and the Board of Education's top 3 priorities, systemic necessities, and ongoing projects. We once again want to acknowledge the focus the Board of Education and the school system is placing on the current pandemic and the start of the school year this past Tuesday. While these items remain a current focus, this presentation is again an example of functions the school system is continuing to ensure the operation of the entire system in collaboration with the county and the state. Next slide. To start, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the hard work of the capital budget development team. The staff members above put in a tremendous amount of time and effort in this budget process. As a result of meetings and collaboration with the county, the team was informed of the anticipated funding level for fiscal year 2022. It is expected that the county's contribution will be between $50 million and $54 million. The team has also received a preliminary conservative funding target from the state of $14.2 million to $15.8 million in general education funding. Hcpss is scheduled to receive an additional $4.8 million in enrollment growth and relocatable classroom or EGRC funding. Next slide. As with everything we do, the capital improvement program aligns with the goals of the Howard County Public School System strategic call to action. The projects in this budget support the objective to create an organizational culture and climate that are supportive and nurturing to provide a safe and healthy environment for students, staff, families, and community members. Next slide. The FY 2022 Superintendent's proposed capital budget totals $108 million. This includes continued funding requests for the construction of Talbot Springs Elementary School, bids approved by the board this evening, new high school number 13, and Hammond High School renovation in addition. The other projects requested include funding for systemic renovations detailed on the systemic renovations project, as well as roofing projects, playground equipment, relocatable classrooms, technology, school parking lot expansions, planning and design, and barrier-free. Next slide. The FY 2023 through 2027 capital improvement program outlines the projects requested in the next 5 out years. In addition to new high school, Talbot Springs Elementary School and Hammond High School with funding requests in FY22 are Dunlogan Middle School renovation and addition to open in September of 2027, new elementary school number 43 to open in September 2028, Oakland Mills Middle School renovation addition to open in September 2030, as well as future project funding for ongoing project lines. While the FY 2022 capital budget is $108 million in fiscal years 2023 through 2027, the projected capital budget ranges from approximately $58 million to $93 million each year. Next slide. As seen previously in a single line item in the capital improvement plan, the long-range systemic renovation projects are presented as individual projects as seen here. While adjustments can be made to individual project lines, it is critical to remember that our buildings continue to age. Systemic renovations are becoming more and more important to maintain the quality of our aging assets. As noted during the pre-development work session, one of the largest challenges facing the capital budget is the balancing of growing enrollment and maintenance needs. This long-range systemic list presents a projected cost by year to perform the renovations currently identified as priorities. Next slide. The long-range master plan through 2031 totals $821 million and includes the prior mentioned projects as well as Centennial High School. While it is difficult to confidently anticipate the possible funding for out years as the funding variables will continue to change, we will continue to adjust the out year requests based on future needs, priority changes, and available funding sources. Next slide. The state priority list is aligned with the FY 2022 proposed capital budget and the CIP just shown. The projects listed are eligible to start construction funding in FY 2022. We conservatively estimate at this time that we would have requested state funding in the amount of $36 million. This is brought to you tonight as the board must also approve the state priority listing for the state capital budget request. This must be approved prior to submission due date in October. Next slide. Now we will take a brief look at the projects included in the proposed capital budget. Talbot Springs Elementary School replacement will be a new facility providing necessary capacity to accommodate enrollment growth. The total project cost estimate for Talbot Springs Elementary School is $43.467 million. The replacement is currently scheduled for occupancy in September of 2022, with the remaining parking lot and field scheduled to be completed by December of 2022. The FY 2022 proposed budget includes $5.09 million to complete the project for opening in September of 2022. Next slide. New High School 13 will be a new facility providing necessary capacity to accommodate the growth at the high school level in Hcpss. The total project cost for high school number 13 is $129.997 million. The project is currently scheduled for completion in September of 2023. The FY 2022 proposed budget includes $42.699 million. As noted previously, construction access and site construction have begun. Next slide. Hammond High School is being renovated with an addition of 200 seats to accommodate enrollment growth. The total project cost estimate for Hammond High School is $106.554 million. The final phase of the project is currently scheduled for completion in September of 2023. The FY 2022 proposed budget includes $29.058 million. Construction is underway for phase 1 of this project. Next slide. The systemic renovation projects include projects that are needed to bring older facilities up to current standards in lighting, electrical, HVAC systems, reconfiguring spaces, and providing for upgrades to other building systems. The projects also request emergency reserve funding in order to be prepared for any unforeseen system needs, as well as a local match for state incentives to gain additional state funding dollars when available for eligible projects. Projects scheduled for systemic renovations in FY22 have a proposed budget of $19.565 million. Next slide. Roofing projects are essential to protect the entire building. The next planned roof replacements are at Gorman Crossing Elementary School and Tridelphia Ridge Elementary. The FY 2022 proposed budget is $5 million toward these two roofing projects. Next slide. The playground equipment project requests funding to maintain a cycle of playground replacement system-wide. In FY 2022, $250,000 is adequate to replace both a kindergarten playground and a grades 1 through 5 playground at one elementary school. Next slide. The relocatable classroom project provides funds for the relocation of existing portable classrooms or purchase of new portable classrooms to be placed at schools in need of additional capacity. Additional classroom spaces are needed to help relieve overcapacity schools until such time as permanent classroom spaces are available. In FY 2022, proposed budget includes a request
Mr. Lubley, we lost you.
Mr. Washington, can you pick up?
Yes, sir. As was spoken, as I know Mr. Luby's having some technical difficulties, I think with the internet right now. Picking up with the relocatable classroom situation, once again, the proposed budget right now is our annual $1.5 million to address our relocatable classrooms for our projected funding, our projected growth of capacity. And this is the dollar amount that we usually have in the year budget every year to take care of this issue. Next slide, please. Technology, once again, 3.7 million. Dan?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Sorry about that. As Mr. Washington noted, I've had a little bit of internet issues. Thank you for picking up for me, Mr. Washington.
Go ahead, sir.
The Department of Information Technology oversees the technology projects and supports and maintains all enterprise technology infrastructure, computer systems, and applications. Technology project funds are required for replacement and continuous improvement to the Hcpss infrastructure, computer systems and applications to ensure that instruction and business needs are met in a secure, standard, and equitable manner. The FY 2022 proposed budget request of $3.75 million for the incremental rollout of the following key projects: cybersecurity improvements, classroom technology updates, enterprise infrastructure upgrades, and enterprise applications. Next slide. School parking lot expansion projects provide for the construction of additional parking spaces and modification of parking lots to improve traffic flow patterns at existing school sites. The FY 2022 proposed budget requests $600,000. Next slide. The planning and design project allow for scope studies to be conducted before a project receives funding on its own project line. Some of the benefits include the ability to ask technical questions before the formal design process, discover unexpected design circumstances in existing buildings, selecting the most advantageous project scope, and can significantly reduce the number of change orders needed during the construction phase of a project. The FY 2022 proposed budget request is $300,000. Next slide. The barrier-free project is used to implement implement needed ADA requirements in current buildings as access issues arise. A budget request of $200,000 is requested in FY 2022 to restore a balance in the barrier-free project for upcoming building adjustments. Next slide. On September 24th, there will be a public hearing and work session for the capital budget. The board will be asked to approve the FY 2022 capital budget and state priority listing. On October 1st, the planning board will hold its public hearing, and on November 2nd, the county council is scheduled to review and approve the proposed budget for submission to the state. On February 11th, 2021, the board will adopt the requested capital budget, which will then be submitted to the county executive and the county council. The board will hold a work session on April 29th, 2021. Following the submission, the next scheduled meeting is a public hearing on May 6th. The board would then be scheduled to adopt the FY 2022 capital budget on May 27th, 2021. Next slide. Thank you for your time and attention. At this time, we'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, so we'll go to Ms. Cutroneo.
I just want to point out, we've had to delay almost every project except the ones currently undergoing by a couple of years, and we won't have any new capacity for 4 years. And we will be short seats even with our new additions with the new high school and Hammond and Talbot Springs. And I just think that's sort of an emergency. 4 years with absolutely no new capacity, pushing out Dunlogan several years, Oakland Mills Middle several years, and I don't even see Oakland Mills High School anymore on this, and it was identified in 2012 to be redone in 2020. So I know that's not right, but I just wanted to make sure the public is aware of this, how short we are in capital funding to address the capacity needs. I'm just stunned that Oakland Mills Middle has been pushed out to 2030 and has been pushed out since I think 2012. And I guess there's really not much else to say. I would like to know, is Oakland Mills High School anywhere? And it's not even on the long range plan anymore.
Mr. Luby.
Yes, ma'am.
I know I just said a lot. I know it's not your fault, but it's just to go 4 years without any capacity projects coming on board or even being close is
Correct.
very concerning, knowing what our projected enrollment is going to be.
And Ms. Cutroneo, if you recall, back in January of last year, when we did an analysis of various Hcpss and the number of projects that over the years that had to be deferred because of either cost issues and things like that, Oakland Mills High School was at the top of that list. So there are that and some other projects that were capacity and renovation projects that had to be deferred. And unfortunately, that is a result of some of the issues we've experienced in terms of funding.
I just wanted to highlight that so the public is aware that this is I mean, by several years, even elementary school 43 has been pushed out to 2028. It's very concerning, and especially for our older schools and not getting the renovations they desperately need. It is just sounding the alarm bells on this.
Okay, Dr. Wu.
Thank you. I have a few questions. The first one is high school 14 for Elk Ridge, right? We talked about that in the last several years. Now, even that's totally out of the scope for 2030. And we have been talking about we're acquiring a land. I think I'm glad to see the Turf Valley, we got the land. And everybody talk about the land, it will be so precious. So if we say high school 14 should be on the map, and we want to go through with the land purchase, should we put that in our long-term projection at least?
Yes, sir. Thank you for the question. High school 14 is still on our long-term radar. At this point, it is projected through the feasibility study that once high school 13 and Hammond come online, that our need across the entire county will be approximately 970 students at the high school level. Those projections and needs obviously can change throughout the years, which is why we will keep high school number 14 on our radar. And you are absolutely correct, especially for a high school that land does become a premium, and we will continue to work with the county to focus on finding land for another high school in that area.
And Mr. Lubley, I think for the land situation, I think the recommendation is for a high school, would it be 30 acres plus 1 acre for every 1,000 students?
So my question is, sorry to interrupt. I think it's just, my point is that we have been discussing the site for high school 14. Now kind of totally dropped the ball. What is that? What's happening there? Why we're not continuing acquiring the land? Make sure we have land available.
The county has continued with looking at the land. I believe it's a longer discussion that we've been having with them because it does revolve around the projections. As noted, we will continue to discuss with them. If you recall, there was an initial review and then a separate task force was applied to look in that specific area as well. And they came back with recommendations similar to what we initially looked at as well. So we will continue to work with the county executive and his staff regarding land for high school 13 or 14 rather in that area.
I'm sorry, I try to push this topic, right? There have been studies, there are only 2 sites available right now with so many task forces discussing that. So my point is, where do we settle down? When do we settle down? And I don't want to you will be purchased by commercials and then we have no alternative at all. And then the land will be more expensive 10 years later, right? I just want, if we put that in our long-term plan, at least on the list showing on the table, then people at least pay attention to that. I just really afraid if we drop the ball right now, there's no momentum really to acquire the land. So if we want to put it there, where do we put it in our long-term capital project?
I understand your concern, sir. I would think that the land acquisition does not necessarily have to have the project placed within this long-range master plan. We can continue with that acquisition and discussions with the county through policy 6000. Similar, that was done with the Turf Valley property where we can identify the need, provide that letter of request to the county so that for lack of a better term, that first right of refusal on that property does come to the school system. So again, we will continue along those lines with the county to make sure that we are not letting this property drop off the radar.
Okay, so I appreciate that. I just hope there should be some way to keep that in the discussion, right? Next time when we come back, you will say we'll keep discussing that. So that's my first question. I really hope there's some way to really check that list. High school 14 site is on our list.
Dr. Wu, I think you've been very clear
Sure.
on that. We have a bunch of hands. Ms.
No,
Cutroneo,
I have a second question. Sorry for that.
I'm going to have to come back to you because we're going to
Okay.
go around because we have 4 hands up. Ms.
Sure.
Cutroneo, do you have another one?
I just wanted to advocate for putting Oakland Mills High School back on some sort of radar. I don't see it anywhere, and it just concerns me that it's not even in the long-range master plan, and just advocating towards that. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Coombs?
Yeah, I want to be really careful with, with our interactions with the county in terms of who's responsible for what and when. We need to make sure that we express a desire and a need to the county, regardless of the administration, as to what our needs are. And then I would also second what Dr. Wu is saying. I am concerned about elementary school 43 being pushed, and elementary school 44. Those 2 are going to be probably more necessary than we think. And I also, back to the Oakland Mills High School renovation, we know that those are sorely needed in terms of, water coming through classrooms, and we need to make sure that we're treating all of our schools equitably. But thank you for your work, and I know this is going to be a rough budget, and I can't imagine what the real number is going to come down to. So thank you.
Okay, Ms. Delmont Small?
Thank you. I think what we have to do both as a body and that the community needs to do as well is to encourage the county side, our county council and our county executive, that they're going to be looking at the general plan. And then when they're looking at the general plan, what we need to be able to do is to ensure that appropriate land is available for additional schools before making plans on changing zoning that's going to increase capacity and that's going to be added to capacity for turnover. Because the problem is we have the school side and the county is making decisions. And if the general plan doesn't even reflect the need and the desire, and basically putting the stake in the ground to say, okay, look at the county. We clearly have a capacity problem. We need to have space for these schools. And it would be even better if we could have the schools where the students are and where the capacity is growing. So I think this is another thing where we have to continue to work with the county to keep, as Mrs. Cutroneo says, hitting the alarm bell to say, look, even though these 3 projects that we have fought for and we've gotten funding for, they aren't even, I don't want anyone to be under the impression that, oh, once they're built, everything is fine. They're not. Mm-hmm. And I think we have to keep that in mind because we're basically way behind in the physical capacity for the number of students that we have, let alone the number of students that are going to be projected.
Okay, Ms. Mallow.
I know that there's a category for ongoing maintenance. Is there any way to elevate the concerns of deferred maintenance and present the kind of compendium of what is in deferred maintenance with this budget when it moves forward to the county?
Mr. Lubley or Mr. Washington?
That is something we can look into, Ms. Mallow. Also understanding that in 2 weeks, we're going to also be presenting the comprehensive maintenance plan from our school facility side of the office. And that also is a situation where you'll see where those do marry up to kind of show the needs on that end as well. They do all fit together.
Okay, so I threw my hand up. And my concern right now has to do with the impact of COVID-19 on capacity. I know Dr. Wu has thrown out some numbers on the number who are not coming back for whatever reason. But as we, who knows when capacity will normalize again as we're looking at the numbers and our capital budget. We have projects we're working on, but the fact that we've had COVID and who knows where what numbers will show up whenever we have to do the count, it may impact our need for capacity across the county. And that is just something that's out there, no telling what it'll look like, but it's going to impact what we're doing. Okay, so Dr. Wu, you'll have the last word.
Okay, first one, I just want to comment. I remember I saw some comment from a county executive said, if we don't put high school 13 on the list, he will not purchase the land, right? So I want to make sure we reserve the land for high school 14. That's coming back to. So my second question is, if I look at the like a 10 years plan, we don't see anything between 24 and 25, 26. What's happening there?
Mr. Lubley, Mr. Washington?
To clarify your question, Dr. Wu, are you speaking specifically with regards to occupancy dates within those times?
Yes. Completion date or yes.
Understood. I believe that is a factor of where we are with our current projects. The CIP, the top priorities are the replacement of Talbot Springs, new high school 13, and the renovation of Hammond High School, renovation and addition. And as we all know, having two high schools, which are larger projects, do take larger capital funding.
Right.
So as we were continuing through the CIP process and focusing on those priorities, it limits the amount of funding, which ultimately limits the projects that we can request or receive funding for in individual years. And that has a trickle down effect, which then affects when the actual occupancy of individual projects come about.
Correct.
I see. So it is really because of the funding shortage. We just couldn't overlap several projects at the same year. Is that right?
That is correct.
Correct. We could have shown it, but the reality of receiving that quantity of funding on top of these three projects, unfortunately, would be unrealistic. So it would just be another situation, as the board discussed several years ago, about having the community go on the roller coaster ride. This is one way to help limit that roller coaster and represent a realistic project base for the community.
So
we continue to focus on the top three priorities.
I see. So if I go back to, for example, 2024, and that year, they estimated $62 million, right? If we move one project forward to that year, we increase by $5 million. I just wonder, that may change a lot of project timeline, right? So you are continue to evaluating that option, right?
We
Absolutely.
are, and if you recall, Dr. Lubley, when we did the capital budget last year, we made those adjustments based off of funding, and it had to do with the priority projects, as Mr. Lubley stated, and we had to make those adjustments once again, based off of the actual ability to get funding for the other priorities that we have.
I see. Okay, thank you very much. I just want to come back to the high school 14 side, right? I really hope you have a really continuous pursuit of that land, one land for this high school 14 to reserve for that, in case in the future we have the money to build it.
Okay, Ms. Cutroneo, do you have anything else to throw out there? No? Okay,
I have
well,
plenty, but no.
beg your pardon?
I have plenty to throw out, but I'll hold it.
Okay, well, given that we have covered everything on our agenda, this meeting is now adjourned.